"Dad, we need your house." Not congratulations, not a question, just that dropped in the middle of Sunday dinner like it had already been decided. I set my fork down slowly and looked at my son Trevor across my mahogany dining table, the one I'd built myself from salvaged oak 15 years ago. Only then did he add, almost as an afterthought, "Patricia's pregnant. I'm 65, been retired from construction work for 3 years now, and I've lived in this house for 30 years. Built most of it myself, actually." But that Sunday evening, sitting at my own table with the late afternoon sun streaming through windows I'd installed, I felt like I was the one who didn't belong. I smiled because that's what you do first when someone tells you they're having a baby. My fingers tightened slightly around my coffee mug, but my voice stayed even. "Congratulations," I said. Patricia reached for Trevor's arm, her manicured fingers gripping his sleeve, her expression careful, watching me more than celebrating. There was no rush of excitement, no details spilling over about doctor visits or due dates, just waiting like they were expecting me to say something specific. Then Trevor leaned forward. "Our place isn't big enough," he said, glancing at Patricia. "We need something bigger." The way he said, "we've been thinking," made it clear this conversation had already happened, just not with me. I let the silence stretch. "And you think that's my problem?" I asked. The room went dead quiet. Patricia inhaled sharply, then straightened like she was stepping into a role she'd rehearsed. "We're just trying to plan ahead," she said, her voice smooth as glass. "For the baby, for stability." I didn't lean back. I stayed where I was, one hand resting on the table's worn surface, feeling the grain of wood I'd sanded and stained myself. "What exactly are you asking?" Another pause. Not confusion, calculation. Patricia leaned forward, folding her hands on the table. "It's just that your house has space, more than you really use. More than I really use." As if 30 years of memories and sweat equity could be measured in square footage. Trevor kept his eyes on the table, not correcting her, not softening her words, just letting her speak for both of them. "This place is quiet," she continued. "It would make things easier for us, especially with a baby coming." "Easier," I repeated. "So this is about convenience." "It's about family," Patricia replied, meeting my eyes directly. "Helping each other when it matters." I nodded once, slow and deliberate. "Yes, helping, not replacing responsibility." Trevor finally looked up. "Dad, we're not trying to take anything from you. We just thought maybe there's a way to make things work for everyone." For everyone. The phrasing was too careful, too practiced. "That is your child," I said quietly, my voice carrying the same authority I'd used on job sites for 40 years. "Your responsibility." Trevor opened his mouth, then closed it again. Patricia leaned back slightly, reassessing her approach like a salesperson who'd just hit unexpected resistance. "You always said you'd help if we needed it," Trevor said, his voice quieter now, almost pleading. I met his eyes across the table. "I will help you build something," I answered, each word deliberate as measuring a cut, "but I won't hand it to you." I stayed where I was, keeping my voice steady as rebar. "If you're not ready to stand on your own, why have a child?" Trevor flinched. Patricia didn't react the same way. She just watched me, her expression composed like she was running calculations rather than processing an emotional blow. That difference didn't escape me. "It's not like that," Trevor said quickly. "We just want to be prepared. Everyone starts somewhere, right? You had help when you were young." I almost laughed at that. "Help. I lived in a one-bedroom apartment for 3 years while I saved for a down payment," I said. "Your mother and I ate peanut butter sandwiches for dinner because we were putting every extra dollar toward this house. That was different. Things were cheaper then. The principle wasn't." I gestured toward the kitchen where I'd installed every appliance myself. "You work, you save, you sacrifice. You earn what you get." Patricia's fingers drummed against the table, faster now. "That takes time," she said, and there was something sharp underneath her reasonable tone. "Yes," I answered simply. "It does." Trevor looked at me for a long moment, then asked quietly, "How did you really do it? I mean, specifically, what was your plan?" For the first time since they'd arrived, I heard my son instead of his wife's agenda. "One step at a time," I said. "I worked overtime every weekend for 5 years. Your mother cleaned houses after her regular job. We drove the same beat-up truck for 8 years because reliable transportation mattered more than image. We didn't eat out. We didn't buy new clothes unless the old ones wore through. We fixed everything ourselves that we could possibly fix. We kept going, even when progress felt impossible." Patricia's gaze shifted away from me, her eyes focusing on framed photos showing Trevor growing up in this house. "You thought I'd make it easy," I finished for her. "You thought family meant never having to prove you could handle responsibility." Neither of them contradicted me. "So what happens now?" Trevor asked, his voice smaller than it had been all evening. I stood up slowly and began clearing the dinner plates they'd barely touched. "Now you figure out what you're willing to work for," I said, "and I'll know whether my son learned anything from the man who raised him." They left about 20 minutes later. No lingering at my front door. No plans made for next Sunday. Trevor's pickup truck pulled out of my driveway, and I stood at my living room window watching the taillights disappear. The next few weeks felt different. Trevor's usual Tuesday phone calls turned into short text messages. Busy with work. Talk soon. When I called, he answered in broad, careful sentences that didn't say anything real. Nothing about doctor appointments. Nothing about how Patricia was feeling. No morning sickness complaints, no cravings, no due date mentioned. The kind of updates I remembered getting from coworkers whose wives were expecting. The absence didn't feel like distance. It felt like omission. 3 weeks after that dinner, I ran into Trevor outside Sanderson's hardware. He looked surprised to see me, like he hadn't expected our paths to cross without warning. "How are you?" I asked, noting the shadows under his eyes. "Good," he said quickly. "Just fixing the toilet in our apartment. Landlord's slow about maintenance." I nodded, then asked the question that had been sitting in the back of my mind like a splinter. "How far along is she?" He hesitated. Long enough for me to notice the calculation behind his eyes. "Early," he said. "Still really early. We're not telling many people yet. No number, no estimate. Just early delivered, like someone reading from a script they'd practiced, but didn't quite believe." That night, I sat at my kitchen table and replayed everything. The timing of their announcement, the way Patricia had watched me instead of sharing anything personal. Even the order of their words. "We need your house. Patricia's pregnant." It hadn't felt like excitement. It had felt like positioning, carefully calculated and measured. I decided I needed to see the truth for myself. The next Thursday afternoon, I drove to their apartment complex on Desert Ridge. Trevor opened the door after a few seconds, his expression shifting the moment he saw me. "Dad, what are you doing here? Is Patricia home?" I asked. "No, she's at work." I stepped inside without waiting for a formal invitation. The apartment looked the same, but not in the way it should have. A new 65-inch TV mounted on the living room wall. Designer handbags lined up on the kitchen counter. Fresh flowers in an expensive vase. None of it matched what I knew about financial situation. Trevor worked freelance IT support. Patricia worked part-time at a real estate office. Together they might bring in $3,500 a month on a good month. But I was looking at easily $8,000 worth of new purchases. I turned to face him directly, the way I used to when he was 16 and insisting he'd only had soda. "Trevor," I said, "is there really a baby?" Trevor froze, not confused or offended, just completely still. Then he exhaled slowly, a sound like air leaving a punctured tire. "No." It wasn't said like a confession. It sounded like something giving way. "We thought," he started, then stopped. "We thought it would make things easier." "Easier to do what?" He swallowed hard. "To convince you to let us have the house." Everything aligned like pieces of a blueprint finally making sense. The timing of that dinner. The way Patricia had spoken for both of them. The absence of pregnancy details. It had never been about preparing for a child. It had been about gaining access to assets they wanted. "So you lied about having a grandchild," I said quietly. "To try to get my house." He didn't argue. He just stood there, surrounded by things he couldn't afford, eyes fixed somewhere past me. "How bad is it?" I asked. Trevor reached for the back of his couch like he needed something solid to hold on to. "It's not that bad," he said weakly. I waited. Sometimes silence gets better answers than questions. "The rent's behind 2 months," he admitted. "And the credit cards are pretty much maxed out." "How many cards?" He hesitated. 4, maybe 5. "And the rest of it?" "We bought all this stuff," he said, gesturing around the apartment. "We wanted the place to look right. And the car payments are killing us." The pattern was clear now. Not one bad decision, but a series of them, creating a foundation that couldn't possibly hold. "I don't understand," he said suddenly. "Everyone else we know is doing the same thing. Bigger apartments, nicer cars. It's just how people live now. Looking successful isn't the same as being successful," I said. "You're not struggling because life is unfair, Trevor. You're struggling because you're trying to live a life you haven't earned yet." "That's not fair, Dad. It's accurate." 3 weeks later, I saw the eviction notice taped to their apartment door. That evening, a text message came through. "We're moving in with Patricia's mom for a while." The real pressure started then. They argued about money, about what had been spent. Patricia didn't want to scale back. The gap between them grew in the same place their budget had failed. A month later, he called. Short, flat. She left. "She went back to her mom's place permanently," he continued. "Said this isn't what she signed up for. Not the debt, not having to downsize, not dealing with reality." 6 months after that, Trevor came by on a Saturday afternoon. No warning, just showed up and knocked. He looked different. Thinner, quieter, but not broken. More like someone who'd finally stopped carrying weight that had never been his to carry. "I found a studio apartment across town," he said eventually. "Nothing fancy, but I can afford it. I'm paying down the debt piece by piece. Got a steady job doing IT support for a medical practice. It's not glamorous, but it's reliable." "Good." Before he left, he looked at me across the table where I'd raised him. "I should have listened," he said. "You're listening now." After he left, I walked through my house slowly, room by room. Nothing had changed and everything had. There was no sense of being watched anymore. No pressure sitting behind ordinary moments. This house had never been a solution to someone else's problems. It had never been something to fix another person's choices. It was the result of years of work, decisions made carefully, progress built without shortcuts. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is letting them face the consequences of their choices. Because that's the only way they learn to make better ones. A house built with your own hands isn't just shelter. It's proof that good things come to those who earn them. And that legacy is something you protect, not something you give away.